Let's talk about whether contract cheating is safe, or whether it's just going to be a monumental waste of your money. And it turns out there are some significant risks associated with these contract cheating services, even leaving aside the ethics and the morality of using them. The first major risk I want to talk about is blackmail. Whenever someone uses a contract cheating service, they run the risk of being held to ransom. That is, that service would threaten to report that student to the institution unless that student pays them more money. This is something that seems to be relatively underappreciated, but it definitely happens and has been documented. This can make contract cheating both A, much more risky, because that student could be reported even after they've graduated, and also B, significantly more costly. That is, the upfront fee might in fact pale in comparison to the blackmail they ultimately have to pay. This creates a major risk for students who are looking to use a contract cheating service, and something that people should be incredibly wary of. The next major risk is that a contract cheating service might simply fail to deliver what they've been paid for. These contract cheating services are often illegal in many countries. For example, they're illegal in the UK and in Australia. This means that they might not be very trustworthy, so they might simply run off with the money that's been paid to them. Alternatively, they might deliver back text that triggers plagiarism detectors. Think of it this way: if the service has been paid a relatively low amount of money to write text, how much effort do you actually think goes into it? Will the writer have reused paragraphs or reused sentences from a prior assignment? Or will that writer have simply used AI? Indeed, programs such as Turnitin, amongst other things, are increasingly able to detect AI-written text. This means that when one is using a contract cheating service, there's a pretty reasonable likelihood that one will get back something that might trigger plagiarism detectors, and/or you might not actually get back any text at all. They might simply run off and abscond with your cash. The next risk is that these contract cheating services might simply do a bad job. They might not enable a student to pass, let alone do well. And it's relatively easy to see why. After all, there's been a race to the bottom in terms of the fees for these contract cheating services. They're often competing on price. But if one is paying a low price to get an assignment written, then how much effort and how much skill actually goes into it? Think of it this way: if that person is paid a relatively low price, will they even have graduated university? Will they have studied something even vaguely similar to what you study? Will they have studied something like the subject you're studying? Oftentimes you might not be getting someone very skilled in your particular area. This means the assignment you get back might simply be subpar and substandard and might not even enable you to pass, and if it does enable you to pass, certainly won't enable you to do well. So the real risk here is that one might fail anyway, even if one uses a contract cheating service, and one might simply get a bad product in addition to risking being picked up for plagiarism. The final risk I want to talk about is that of illegality and career implications. If someone's used a contract cheating service, gets a job, and is ultimately found out, then one could have committed fraud, which is a little bit illegal. That is, the person would have obtained a benefit by deception. This ultimately as well could lead to that person losing their job and suffering very negative career implications. After all, if one is found out to have been the person who contract cheated, then gets fired, then maybe getting the next job will also be difficult. So you do need to bear in mind there can be long-term ramifications from this, especially if these contract cheating services are in fact blackmailing people and are threatening to report people if they don't pay out more money. In which case, they might actually chase someone down at their future workplace and shake them down for additional cash. It's a risk you need to bear in mind, and it's certainly something that makes these contract cheating services even less attractive than they already are. And this is in addition to the ethical and moral problems with using these services. So those are some risks associated with using contract cheating services. As I've indicated, there are major problems that can arise from these, including simply being caught, being blackmailed, the work product they're putting out, and the career implications if one were ultimately to be found out having used these. In short, the risk-return relationship of using a contract cheating service is bad. The rewards are relatively limited. You might not even get back the assignment you've asked for, or if you get it back, it might trigger a plagiarism detector or simply be a bad product. And the risks can be quite high. In addition to potentially triggering that plagiarism detector, you might ultimately be blackmailed, and you run the risk of ultimately failing your course and/or suffering long-term career implications. This makes contract cheating a relatively unattractive prospect, and something you really need to be incredibly cautious about if you were to consider using one of these services.